All right, greetings, fellow car enthusiasts. Today we're on episode 1 of The Cars That Move Us, and it's a good one. I'm excited about it. Today we're going to get into the pony car wars and how Chevy and Ford created a whole new car segment, and they did a fantastic job at it. So let's get into it. Let's go back in history, going back to the 60s. And kind of just wrap your brain around what's going on in the 60s. So World War II ended in 45. Mom and dad, they're just so grateful to not be at war. GI Bill is out there helping people get their education. Mom and dad, they're coming into money. And what do they want? They want luxury. They want convenience. They want all the things that they didn't have growing up or going through the hard times of the war. So in the automotive world, through the 50s, what do you think of when you think of the 50s? Me, I think of the Bel Airs. I think of the Cadillacs and the tail fins. I think of the Belvederes, just massive land yachts. Lincolns, just the size of a small town kind of a thing. Like just big, bulky, heavy, luxurious cars. And that's what mom and dad wanted. And that was everywhere. They were beautiful, all chromed out, and they were just blinging to the nines, right? But you got all these baby boomers coming out. And these baby boomers, there's a lot of them. And they're a little rebellious, right? They don't necessarily want what mom and dad had. They don't necessarily understand why you need to drive a boat on the street. That just doesn't make sense. So they're not as interested in this stuff. What are they interested in? They're interested in rock and roll music. They're interested in going fast and hot rodding and having fun, having adventures, right? But the car market at this time, it didn't have a lot for these boomers to choose from. Sure, you can get your GTOs. You can get your Chevelles. You can get your Torinos. You can get these big, heavy things with big displacement motors, and they can go fast, but they're heavy. They're not very sporty. They're good at going fast in a straight line. So the boomers, not all of them were interested in that. So that's kind of what's going on in the market. So enter Lee Iacocca. He's working over at Ford. Starts off as an engineer, moves up through the sales ranks, ends up becoming a VP at Ford in 20 short years. Really just climbed the ranks, and he's a visionary, man. He really understands the car market. He really understands what people want, and he does a fantastic job. So Lee Iacocca, he's one of the VPs at Ford, and he sees this. He sees these boomers and how they're not really interested in the cars that are being offered. And so he is presented with a wonderful opportunity. And what does he do with that? He creates an icon. He creates a pony car. So he introduces this Mustang, this new pony car, at the New York World's Fair on April 17th, 1964. And people immediately love it. They love its sleek design. They love its long, sexy hood. They love its short deck lid where the trunk is. They love that it looks fast, regardless whether or not it is fast. You could get it with a 6-cylinder, weren't exactly fast, but it looks fast. It looks sporty, and the best part, they were affordable. You could buy them for limited amount of money. Side note, my dad, he lived through this era, and he was telling me of how he went into the dealership when he was in high school. He was a farmer, had more dollars than cents. And he was in love with this GTO. Bought it brand new for $3,500. $3,500 for a GTO Judge. That's just unreal. So the fact that they could make something so clean, so sexy, and have it be affordable for the boomers coming of age, it was a fantastic instant success. So to kind of set that picture, they sold 400,000 units in the first year. Put that in perspective, this last year, Toyota only sold 200,000 Corollas. They only sold 200,000 Tacomas. And the Ford Mustang itself only sold 46,000 in 2023. So, that was not only unheard of, it set all sorts of sales record. No other car since the war had sold that many units. And to do that in its first year when it didn't exist before that. And adding to that, they even segment the Mustang as a 64 and a half. It came out as a 65 model year, but a 64 and a half was those first couple of months when they first started production in September to where they almost sold 150,000 units just in those first couple months. So a true 64 and a half, is another really cool feather in your cap. So Ford did this, immediate success, selling like hotcakes. And it was like Ford, they came up with the magic recipe. They could print their own money now that they had created this pony car, this Ford Mustang. And so with every good story, though, as you rise in your power, as Lee Iacocca created this Ford Mustang, it wasn't long before somebody else was like, I think I need to get in on that. And with every good story, you need a nemesis. You need a rival. Clark Kent needs Lex Luthor. Batman needs Joker. Pepsi needs Coke, kind of a thing. Those rivals, they make us better. They make us who we are. And as the Ford Mustang rose, so did its rival, the Chevy Camaro. So let's put this in perspective. 64, this segment didn't exist. Ford created the Mustang. Boom! Pony car. First one. Named after a Mustang. It wasn't a big Clydesdale horse like your GTOs. It was sporty. It was smaller. It was sleeker. So it was a pony, right? Chevy wanted to get a piece of this pie. So by 66, September 29th of 1966, they introduced the Chevy Camaro as a 67 model year. And they didn't hold barred. They didn't try and shade what they were after. They marketed as a small, vicious animal that eats Mustangs. So they were telling you straight up, we're here to fight that Mustang. And so, again, immediate nemesis, immediate rival right there. But to make such a bold claim, to make the claim that the Camaro is a small, vicious animal that eats Mustangs when that car didn't exist is a miracle in itself, right? So Chevy had other cars that were similar in size, similar in scope. For example, they had their Chevy Corvair. So it was a rear-engine vehicle, decent platform. It was suffering from some bad press from a guy named Ralph Nader. You may have heard of him. He wrote a book about the Corvair being unsafe at any speed. And Chevy had updated suspensions and stuff, and things were a lot safer. It was a decent design, rear engine. I mean, think Porsche 911, that's a rear engine as well. But it was a little ahead of its time. People weren't comfortable with it, and so it was suffering from bad press. They also had the Chevy Nova, which was basically a shrunk-down version of the Chevelle. And so they had similar things that could cross over, but it wasn't good enough. So they, in essence, they started from scratch, and within just a few years, they were able to create something that could not only compete against it, but be better than it. They didn't just come out with a Mustang lookalike. They came out with the Camaro. They hit the ground running. They brought performance variants where the Mustang, it was marketed as the every person's car, the car that you can make your own. You can get yourself an inline six. You can get yourself a powerful, spunky V8, and you can make it your own. But no, Camaro, when they came out, they had performance variants in mind. They had the SS, the Super Sport. They had the RS, the Rally Sport. They had an RS SS. They also had the Z28, which was designed for Trans Am racing. They came out of the gate looking to grab that performance segment. Yeah, Ford was there first. Can't change that. But we can make ours better. We can make ours beefier. We can make ours faster. Think of the Camaro SS 396. Just amazing engine packed in a little lightweight, nimble car. It was a killer. And so they didn't want to just compete. They wanted to dominate. But again, with every rivalry, Ford, they didn't just say, oh, Chevy came out with a better Camaro. No. What did they do? They came out with better Mustangs. Think of the GT350, the GT500, the Boss 302, fantastic muscle cars that not only shaped the automotive industry, but pop culture. Think of so many movies with these cars as heroes. Bullet comes to mind with that. dark green Mustang, just beautiful car, and made me want to drag race down, every street I could. So they changed the mind of pop culture. Like, everybody had their biases, but now you were either a Mustang guy or you were a Camaro guy. Like, there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Those were two very distinctive piles, and we did not cross it. I'm a Camaro guy, and if you're a Mustang guy, you're probably an idiot, but, I can respect that. So it really branched into these culture wars. But it wasn't just Chevy and Ford at this point. Like, with any other market, I guess you could say, other companies saw money was to be made. They were making so much money selling these performance cars. So what did they do? AMC, American Motors Company, they brought in the Javelin. They put their little twist on it, a lightweight, high-performance sports car. Pontiac, cousin to Chevy, they came out with the Firebird. Shared a lot of design cues, but they made it a little more refined, a little nicer interior, a little more Trans Am focused, hence the Pontiac Trans Am Firebird. Mercury, they came out with a Cougar. Again, that was another Lee Iacocca idea. He resurged the energy within Mercury. Lee Iacocca, maybe we should do an episode on him. He was a really cool guy. He even came up with the concept of the minivan, right? And I know that seems out of place in a muscle car episode, but that definitely changed the industry. And so things that came out of Lee's brain, fantastic. The Mopar guys weren't going to be beat, so what did they do? They came out with the Challenger and the Cuda, came out with a Hemi engine. All these things just to grab more of that segment. But it wasn't just dollar share. They were competing for the literal heart and soul of this generation, this boomer generation that seemed to have so much energy and a lot of disposable income that they could put so much money into these things. And it worked. And that raged on. And with every new year came new performance variants, new suspension upgrades, new interiors, new features. So all this competition, it made a better car. And so who was the beneficiary? Us, as the consumers. Us. I wasn't there at the time, but you can imagine, right? I heard stories. Must have been fantastic times. And so this competition went back and forth. And it wasn't just a muscle car era thing. Even after the muscle car era, getting into the 70s and the 80s, as carb restrictions and fuel shortages made performance cars less desirable, they still found ways to make that competition. Chevy and Ford, I think through the years, Motor Trend has done 20 different covers of the Camaro and Mustang rivalry. It's one of these things it's as old as time. And it continued through, awkwardly, albeit through the 70s and 80s when everything was awkward. We all have our awkward stage. And then going through the 90s as technology comes into play, you're starting to get fuel-injected engines, starting to get more efficient, and you can bring in more horsepower through fuel injection and efficiencies. Getting into the 2000s, things are starting to rile up. And then sadly, the Camaro dies in 2002, I think was the last for a while. But then it was magically resurrected in 2010. Thanks in large part, I think so, because I was a big fan of the Transformers movie. Bumblebee, fantastic. That concept car that they had in there, in my mind, it was yes, thank you. Chevy needs to do that. And I mean, there probably was more to it than that. But in my brain, that's what brought it back to life. And then now, here in 2024, we arguably have the best pony cars ever created with Camaro ZL1 and let's say the Ford Mustang Dark Horse. There's so many great Mustangs right now. And high performance, high horsepower, refined suspension. They're just fantastic, not only pony cars, but they're fantastic sports cars. You can put them up against a Porsche 911 right now, and it's going to hold its own, and in certain aspects, it may even beat it, depending on, all that other good stuff. But it was just fantastic, and that rivalry between them continues. And even now, Chevy has announced 2024 is the last year that they will make the Camaro, at least as its internal combustion counterpart. Ford has the Ford Mustang Mach-E. They haven't said anything about killing off the gas-powered Mustang. There's rumors that Chevy may bring back the Camaro as an EV. But again, time will tell on that. But one thing can be certain is this rivalry will most likely continue to play out. And rivals, they're a funny thing because we hate them, but we got to be grateful for them, right? Without our rivals, without the nemesis to make us grow and to get stronger and to get bigger, oftentimes people are just left to their own devices. But with that rival, with that competitor, like, it forces you to rise to the next level. It forces you to be the next best version of you. So often, we bemoan having a competitor, whether it's in business, whether it's in sports, whether it's, fill in the blank, politics, whatever. Those rivals, they're not just there to destroy us, even though sometimes it feels like they are, but they're actually there to make us better. So the next time you're presented with a frustrating competitor, a frustrating rival, just realize that they're actually there to make you better. I mean, prime example, look at the Chevy Camaro and the Ford Mustang. Without their constant tit for tat, back and forth, punch for punch, would we have the amazing cars that we have now? I argue no. And so that becomes the fuel for growth, is that rivalry, that discomfort, that friend or that nemesis there to push you along. So, hope you've enjoyed this story about the Pony Car Wars. I know I had a lot of fun writing it up and doing all the research for it, and I really enjoy talking cars, so win-win. So tune in next time where we will actually talk about the Chevy Square Body and how it is quite possibly the greatest machine ever built, and why I can say that. But yeah, tune in next time.